This is the new 2019 Mercedes-Benz A-Class, and it's the new entry-level model from Mercedes-Benz. You might think the entry-level Mercedes is the CLA, but it isn't, not any longer. The A-Class has just arrived to unseat the CLA as the base Mercedes. This starts at just $32,500. And today, I'm going to review it. I've borrowed this 2019 A-Class from Fletcher Jones MOTORCARS here in Newport Beach, California in Orange County. They're the largest Mercedes-Benz dealership in the country, and so they get the first and the coolest of everything, and they've just gotten the first few 2019 A-Class models. This car is now finally coming to the United States. I say that because even though the A-Class is just coming out here in North America, it's been on sale in other countries for years. For about 20 years, in fact, as the original A-Class first came out in Europe in the late 1990s. Back then, it was a hatchback, and it's still a hatchback in some markets overseas, but here in North America, we're just going to be getting the A-Class sedan. So what exactly is the A-Class sedan? Well, it's called the A220, and it's front-wheel drive with all-wheel drive available for $2,000 extra. The only engine available right now, anyway, is a turbocharged four-cylinder that makes 188 horsepower and 221 pound-feet of torque. And yes, like I mentioned, this is the new entry-level Mercedes-Benz. Pricing starts at around $32,500, which makes this only $700 cheaper than the CLA. Why have both? I think the theory here is the CLA is supposed to be the cool, swoopy, coupe-looking model compared to the more regular A-Class, sort of like how the CLS is compared to the E-Class. The CLA also starts with around 20 horsepower more than the A-Class. So today I'm going to take you on a tour of the new A-Class, and I'm going to show you all of the quirks and features of the latest entry-level Mercedes-Benz. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'm going to give it a Doug score. And for more of my thoughts on the A-Class, click the link below to visit autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also rounded up a list of the cheapest used Mercedes-Benz models currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features with the interior, and specifically I want to talk about quality. Now, you may remember I recently reviewed the Mercedes-Benz CLA, and I was not very kind to the CLA. In fact, I ripped it up for having a terrible interior, but the CLA is an older design. The A-Class obviously is brand new for this model year, and the difference shows everything in this car is far nicer. There's no crappy plastic in the center control stack, for example. Everything is much nicer there. Same with the center console, no crappy, ugly plastic. Everything is vastly improved in there. And it's not just that. The dashboard looks nicer. The materials they've used far better. The climate vents look far nicer. Everything in this car is a big improvement. And there are other big improvements in terms of quality in here as well. The steering wheel in this car, for instance, is the same steering wheel used in far more expensive Mercedes-Benz models, and it gives you a lot more options than the older Mercedes-Benz steering wheel. Same with the gauge cluster in the center screen. You now have this one giant center display screen in here, just like all the more expensive Mercedes-Benz models. Now, there's a new CLA coming out soon, and I'm sure it's going to be improved with a lot of this stuff, but right now there's no question this vehicle has the best interior in this entry-level luxury car class, including the Audi A3 and all the other rivals. This is an impressive place to be. This car has a sticker price of under $40,000. Now, next up, this A-Class is rolling out some next-generation Mercedes-Benz technology and features and innovations, and you can tell that in a lot of places. Just getting in this car, for example, the warning chime is a little more interesting than your standard boring Mercedes warning chime. Take a listen. Next up, another one of the things you immediately notice when you climb in is that the stalks coming out of the steering column are different. The stalk on the left for the turn signals and the windshield wipers is different than any other Mercedes-Benz, and same with the stalk on the right. That's the column shifter. There's no center console shifter in this car. Instead, you have this stalk over on the right, small, just the size of the turn signal stalk, controls what gear you're in. Again, different from other Mercedes-Benz models. And another big difference from other Mercedes-Benz models, the A-Class is rolling out this MBUX feature with a voice control system that is similar to Siri for iPhone users. It's not like a regular voice control system where you're like, set the climate control to 27 degrees. Instead, you can have more of a general conversation with it. Take a listen. Hey, Mercedes.
How can I help you?
I'm warm.
I'm setting the temperature to 72 degrees.
It can also do things with a simple command that I'm surprised it can do. Again, take a listen. Hey, Mercedes.
How can I help you?
Change interior ambient lighting to blue.
Okay, I'm changing the color.
Unfortunately, this system isn't quite as good as Siri because it can't do everything you might want, and I got a little frustrated figuring that out. Hey, Mercedes.
How can I help you?
How much does a giraffe weigh?
What do you want to do?
How much does a giraffe weigh?
Please repeat.
A giraffe! How much does it weigh?
What can I do for you?
Now, next up, another example of a big difference from sort of the old ethos of Mercedes-Benz models, the center control stack controls. You can see they look far nicer than they have in even E-Class models in the past. These controls are silver, they feel nice to touch, they look like the kind of thing you would expect to see in an S-Class. They are absolutely handsome. Now, next up, a couple of other interesting new items in this car that you won't find in any other Mercedes-Benz yet. I want to start with the cup holders. You can say they look like standard cup holders, but there's a play button on them. So what happens? You press that and it pops out a little drink holder in case your cup is smaller than the cup holder size, and that way the cup holder can be configured to fit your drink. You'll notice there is a similar play button pointing the other way on the bottom of the cup holders. You press that and it again pops out a drink holder thing, except for the cup holder on the other side. Now, moving up from the cup holders, you have a wireless charging pad, which is a feature that will probably be in all new cars soon. One interesting item with this wireless charging pad is the fact that there's this little plastic lever that you can pull out. Might be thinking, well, what is that for? That's to keep your phone in place. A lot of wireless charging pads, your phone just sits there, and if you go on a rough road, it can bounce around. But with that little lever, it won't happen. Pretty good idea. Now, the new A-Class also rolls out an updated infotainment system for Mercedes-Benz, similar to other ones I've covered, but there are some big new features, one of which is this center touchpad. Instead of just having a little pad where you slide your finger around randomly, this one provides feedback. So as I'm moving my finger, you can hear the clicks. Every time it's clicking, it's also providing actual feedback on the pad itself, like a little bump or a shock to let me know that it's moved through a different item. This allows me to go through different menus and screens without quite having to take my eyes off the road so much, since I know that it's going through the items because I can feel it in my fingers. That is a pretty good idea. But for all of you out there who don't like using these center console touchpads, and there are a lot of you, don't worry. This screen in the center is also still a touch screen. And in fact, it's a tremendously responsive touch screen. You can see I'm going through menu items, clicking on stuff, scrolling through things, and it immediately responds to my touch. Absolutely zero lag, just like you would see on a smartphone. People have been saying, why can't cars have the same responsiveness in their touch screens as smartphones? Well, this one does. And you can see especially the navigation map is tremendously responsive to the touch. When I move it around, when I swivel it, zoom in and out, probably the most responsive touchscreen I have seen yet. Car technology is starting to catch up to smartphone technology, apparently. Now, next up in the glove box, you open up the glove box and there's a little diagram there telling us the owner's manual is in here. There's a little arrow. Well, thank you, Mercedes-Benz. I wouldn't have been able to find the owner's manual in the glove box without that helpful diagram. I hope printing that diagram didn't cost more than about 7 cents, because it is not necessary. Now, speaking of the infotainment screen, because this infotainment system is updated compared to other Mercedes-Benz models, there's a lot of interesting infotainment stuff to cover. And I want to start with Seat Kinetics. You go into the Comfort tab and you have Seat Kinetics, and you can turn that on. So you may be wondering, what exactly does Seat Kinetics do? Well, it moves the seat around while you're driving. Now, this isn't a massage function. It's not designed to like massage you, but like when I turn on, I notice that the seat moves just in little increments, like the backrest will move a little and the bottom will move a little, and I don't know if it's trying to like keep you alert or just keep you moving on a long drive. Now, next up, before I move on any further, one item I want to talk about in this infotainment system is the back button, which is just brilliant. So I'm on this seat Kinetics screen, and then I want to go to the climate controls menu. So I bring that up, and you can see that in the upper left, it tells me not only that I can go back, but exactly where I would go back to if I press the back button being located in this center touchpad area. Now, this is a good idea. A lot of times I'll be using an infotainment system and I'll press back and it will take me back like 3 menu screens. And I'm like, why did that happen? But this actually shows where you will go back to if you press the back button. That's an excellent idea for an infotainment system display. It just makes it a little bit more useful, a little bit more convenient, a little bit easier to use. And next up, another interesting item with this infotainment system, like all luxury car infotainment systems seem to offer now, you don't just have to type in your destination, you can actually write it in your own handwriting with your finger on the touchpad. The cool thing about this car is that you can write out words. You don't have to go letter by letter like in some vehicles. Instead, you can write out 10 letters in a row and it will pick them up as one individual word when you have finished writing. That is a really good idea because going letter by letter is slow and complicated, but being able to write out words means that it's actually easy to enter a destination. Now, next up, an interesting vehicle setting. In the gauge cluster, you have a speedometer that shows the speed in a normal setting and like a dial like most cars. And you also have a digital speedometer that shows your speed digitally. But you go into the infotainment system and you can add an additional speedometer. That one will display the speed digitally in kilometers per hour next to the speed display in miles per hour. And that way, if you go to Canada or something, or if you're British and you go down to mainland Europe, you can have both the miles per hour and kilometers per hour display digitally right there for you to tell how fast you're going in various different places. Now, with that said, in the infotainment screen where you can select how you want your units to be displayed, you can see the graphic shown for the units display screen is kmh and mph next to each other, but kmh is larger and further forward, as if Mercedes-Benz thinks kilometers per hour is better than miles per hour. How dare they make such a determination? Next up, here's a cool infotainment system convenience feature. It's great attention to detail, similar to the back button that tells you what screen you're going back to. All right, so you're on the main home screen and you can scroll through various different items, your navigation map, your phone, your media, your car settings. All infotainment systems have that. But this one also has little shortcut buttons on this main screen. For instance, if you want to go home, there's that little button there. You press it and it will take you to home in the navigation system. That way, if you want the car to navigate you home, you don't have to go into the navigation system icon and then scroll through some menus and click on some things and then find take me home. There's just a shortcut on that main screen, which is brilliant. And there's another shortcut button right there for the navigation system too. Click on that button to the left of the home button and it will take you to the enter a destination screen. So again, you don't have to go through all sorts of menus if you just want to simply enter a destination and start that process. And there are these shortcuts for all of the different items on the home screen for all of the most used features, which is a really good idea. Little extra buttons that save you time and add convenience to your infotainment experience. Now, next up, I want to move on to the gauge cluster screen, which obviously shares this giant screen with everything else, but obviously the gauge screen is directly behind the steering wheel. It has a few quirks of its own. And I'm going to start specifically with the safety screen that displays for you how far you are from the car in front of you. Now, you can see it in the center of this gauge cluster screen in smaller screen size, or if you scroll down, you can also have the option to expand it to full screen, and then you have a much larger look at how far you are from the car in front of you using this sort of Mercedes-Benz horizon screen image, which is kind of cool. Now, you have that same display option with the navigation screen. You can see it in the center in this tiny little display screen, or if you want to see it larger, you can make it go full screen, and then it takes away your speedometer and your tachometer. It leaves only the essentials like your digital speedometer, and then the navigation system is displayed in a very large size directly in front of your eyes in the gauge cluster, so you don't have to take your eyes too far off the road. It will even do it for car info. You have this tiny screen in the center that shows you, like, you know, your distance to to empty your average fuel economy, but if you want, you can expand that to full screen. And it has a very cool graphic, and you can see all of your car info in a larger screen if that's what you want to look at in your gauge cluster instead of your speedometer and your tachometer. And the gauge cluster screen is even more configurable than that. Check this out. The speedometer doesn't have to be just a speedometer. It can also be changed to show your clock or various car info or your route schedule or your Bluetooth information if that's what you want, instead of seeing your speedometer displayed in a normal dial. And it's the same story on the other side of the gauge cluster screen with the tachometer. The tachometer doesn't have to simply be your tachometer. You can also change it to show your consumption, your eco mode. It can even show your navigation map if you want to see the directions over there. And you can also have it show that driver assist horizon screen that I showed you. You could also put in the center screen. So you can really configure anything to be basically anywhere in this gauge cluster. And it's all easily controlled with this little trackpad on the steering wheel. You just move your thumb or your finger and you can switch between exactly which gauge or screen you're controlling and exactly what is shown on each gauge or screen. Now, next up, I want to move back to the back seat of the new A-Class. And the first thing you notice when you climb back here is that this car has a lot more room in back than the CLA. Now, legroom is actually about the same. These cars are about the same size. It's hard to increase that, but headroom is vastly improved. While the CLA has that sort of coupe flowing look in the back and that robs some headroom, this car is more of a traditional sedan, and so there is a lot more headroom. I'm pretty tall, and even I have a couple of inches left of headroom in this car. Now, that shouldn't be too much of a surprise because the A-Class actually has more overall total interior volume than the CLA. So even though these cars are about the same size, one advantage the A-Class has, it's just bigger on the inside. And you can really tell that in the back seat. Other interesting items worth noting in the back seat: I complained that the CLA didn't have rear climate vents. Well, the new A-Class does, so you have some climate control back here, even though there isn't a separate zone for rear passengers. The CLA, I also complained that there wasn't a center armrest. In the A-Class, you do have a center armrest, and it even has nice little cup holders so you can store a drink while you ride around back here. Now, next we move outside in the A-Class, and specifically I want to start with the trunk, which is actually a fairly normal trunk. It's reasonably large, but there's nothing particularly unusual or exciting or special in the trunk of this vehicle. However, one thing I did notice on the trunk lid, above the license plate hidden, you have a little Mercedes-Benz script written under there. No one will ever notice that. Not sure why they bothered printing it there, but it's there. Now, next up, I'm under the hood, as you can see, but first I want to talk about the general look of the A-Class. You'll notice I haven't done any exterior quirks and features, and that's not a mistake. I don't plan to. There aren't really any. Like I mentioned, the CLA is supposed to be the sporty, exciting four-door car in Mercedes-Benz entry-level lineup, and this one doesn't have that same sporty, thrilling look, and you can tell. Now, I don't want you to think I'm calling this car ugly, because I don't think it is ugly. Instead, it's just sort of tame, docile, simple on the outside. It looks like a baby Mercedes-Benz, but not anything more than that. There's nothing quirky or thrilling or particularly exciting about its styling. But anyway, next up we move under the hood, and this is a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. Like I mentioned before, 188 horsepower, 221 pound-feet of torque, which is a pretty healthy torque number for a vehicle of this size. One interesting quirk I did note under the hood: the underside of the hood in vehicles is always a little bit different in each car. In this one, they went with a bunch of circles. So when you open up the hood, it looks like bubbles. It looks like a bunch of undersea bubbles under the hood of this thing. Not sure why they chose that design, but they did. And so those are the quirks and features of the new Mercedes-Benz A-Class. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the new A-Class. Hard to believe driving an A-Class here in North America. Now, maybe the more interesting thing about the A-Class is obviously its market position against the CLA. I think a lot of people are going to be like, why do they have both of these? I don't think it's that surprising they have both of these. You have the regular one and the sporty one. I think it is a little surprising they committed to both of these, given that the market is really into SUVs. I wonder if they would have been better served by like a different variant of the GLA or some other smaller SUV or something like that. The sticker price on this one is $39 and change, which is an important price point because this is under $40,000 for a new Mercedes. And a lot of times when you're buying the budget, you know, BMW, Mercedes, Land Rover, whatever, it doesn't feel that nice inside. This is so different. The interior is so nice, and you have great technology. I mean, fantastic technology. This is the kind of stuff you would expect to see in an S-Class, in an E-Class. It's really impressive that some of these features are debuting in the A-Class, the entry-level car. In terms of acceleration, I'm feeling that it's actually surprisingly peppy, at least kind of in traffic, slowing down and speeding up a little bit. I do think it feels a little underpowered, but I would actually make the same argument for the base CLA with only 208 horsepower. I think, though, generally speaking, and for most drivers, it'll be fine. It's fine to drive around town, around cities, which is where this will be mostly used. I'm filming this video before the new CLA comes out. The new one will probably be out this summer, maybe this fall. So this car will have kind of an 8-month head start with all this technology. Now, when the new CLA comes out, it will also have this interior, this technology, etc. And I suspect the price gap between the two vehicles will widen. But right now, I don't know why anybody would buy a CLA over this, given this car's similarities and then its dramatically better technology and its larger interior. You hear more engine than you do in a lot of Mercedes-Benz models. It certainly is the entry-level model. I mean, it doesn't have that sort of same, traditional old-school Mercedes-Benz ultra-luxury vibe to it. And you will get some people complaining, oh, this isn't a true Mercedes. It's, small front-wheel drive, blah, blah, blah. And people made the same complaints about the CLA. But, Mercedes doesn't make vehicles for people who are like, my grandfather told me what it meant to have a Mercedes back in the 60s. They make cars for people who actually want to buy them, and they find there to be a market segment here. And so they've created the A-Class for that market segment. Steering and handling in this car, it's okay. I get the sense driving it that this car could be like an all-star. If they wanted to, they could make this into a really fun car because it doesn't have that much size, and you can tell it's kind of ready to go and it feels pretty light. The problem is that the steering and handling in this particular one is clearly comfort biased, and so the steering is light and fairly slow to respond considering what I think this platform might be capable of now that I'm driving it. Generally speaking, I actually find this to be a pretty nice car. Anytime a base entry-level car from a luxury brand comes out, people are up in arms. The Boxster, when it came out in 97, oh, a baby Porsche, what a joke. I think if you get past that and just look at what this car is, it's a pretty good price, 40 grand or less. I mean, it starts at $32,500 for a brand new Mercedes. It's got a ton of great tech. It's got a nice interior. I think on an objective look at this car, you would think that this is a pretty good car. And so that's the new Mercedes-Benz A-Class, the first Mercedes-Benz A-Class, at least here in North America. This car is priced and sized to compete with the Audi A3, and the performance is about the same too, but I think its closest competitor is Mercedes' own CLA, which is in the same showroom. A new CLA is about to come out, and to me it looks cooler and more exciting, and it's a little bit sportier, but the A-Class has more interior space, so either way, you have a lot of options when it comes to entry-level models if you're looking for a Mercedes-Benz. Now it's time to give this one a Doug score.
Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the A-Class is fine, not especially handsome or ugly, and gets a 5 out of 10. Acceleration 0 to 60 is in the high 6-second range, and it gets a 2 out of 10. Handling is fine, secure and comfortable, but not tuned for performance, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Fun factor is minimal, it's not that fast or that tossable, and it gets a 3 out of 10. Finally, cool factor isn't all that high. It's a Mercedes, sure, but the baby Mercedes, the cheap one, and it gets a 4 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 18 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features, and the A-Class I drove is shockingly loaded. It stops short of stuff like self-driving or 360-degree cameras, but it's well equipped for a car at this price point, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Comfort is surprisingly good, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Quality is very good. It's a nice car on the inside, and I'm impressed with all the materials, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Practicality is good, but not exceptional. It's about normal for this segment. It gets a 5 out of 10. Finally, value. This car isn't fast or fun, but it's a lot of tech and a great brand name in a reasonably priced package, and it gets a 7 out of 10 for a total daily score of 33 out of 50. Added up, and the Doug score is 51 out of 100. I haven't reviewed a lot of cars in this segment, but here's where it falls against the few that I have, including the BMW i3 electric hatchback, the Tesla Model 3, and the Volvo XC40 crossover. The A220 holds its own, and it's way cheaper than the Model 3. It may surprise you that the A220 loses to the Mercedes CLA, but the A-Class wins big in the daily categories. The CLA only wins overall because I reviewed the high-performance AMG model, which did much better in the weekend categories.
Regular back seat? Shocked back seat. Oh my god, you say it's a A-Class?